The local blacksmith collected it and took it to his shop to save, so he didn't have to buy coal. Well, then some entrepreneurs came along, they dug into the hill, and they found that there was a good supply of coal, and the canal was running then from Akron to Cleveland. So they, according to the records, they shipped as much as 300,000 tons a year, as I recall, on the barges to Cleveland. And interesting part about it, you fast forward, then another 100 years, they built Chapel Hill. And while they were building Chapel Hill, some of the bulldozers fell into the pits, the underground mine, wasn't like 3 or 4 feet. But they found out that that whole hill was underlined with honeycombed areas, and they were about to build that huge tower up there, that communication tower. They found out the base of that tower was right on top of an abandoned mine. So they had to move it, fill it in. That was been the history. We show records in many areas where the football field on some areas of Ohio, not only here but other areas, would collapse because when they built the football field, they dug in the side of the hill and they took out most of the overburden. So there was a void there. And we have pictures showing them excavating, taking the rest of the coal and backfilling it and make a new football field. Well, it was the only way. You had whale oil or you had coal. And it was just a way of life. Every house, our home there in Stowe had a coal cellar. Every house had a coal cellar until usually the end of World War II, when the conversion was going over to oil and natural gas. So it just kept the company going. We always bought, my dad bought 6 tons of Kentucky bluegrass. That was chunks about this big around. And when it burned, you didn't have a handful of ash left. Some of the local strip mine coal, when you got it burned, you had as much ash as you had coal to start with. So you had to dispose of that. And so we get 5 to 6 ton in October, November, put it into coal. Then we cut 30, 40 cord of wood a year and burnt wood along with the coal. That was, most people didn't have wood available, but we did. And we had a wood lot there. There was always down trees or dying trees. So we used that and it saved a ton of money. This coal cart was used by the industry starting about 1830 until 1900. And prior to that time, they had little narrow gauge, well, they didn't have any railroad at all. They just hauled it out on a cart. And then as they needed more coal, as the companies got bigger and they built tracks, narrow and buried tracks. And they put a car about half this size up there. And then they filled it and pulled it out with some cases where they had low overhead, they used goats, small ponies, goats. And that was before the electric cars, obviously. And they held about 1,000 pounds of coal, and the miner would fill it and put his tag on it, so he got credit for that ton of coal. And though they did it the hard way in those days, most of the coal seams that they mined in Ohio at that time were probably 2.5 to 3 feet. So they laid on their side, and they had a hand drill, picture of one somewhere, a hand drill that they drilled in about 5 or 6 feet, put a stick of dynamite in there, lit the fuse, yelled fire in the hole, and took off. And it loosened up the coal, so they lay on their side and dig it out and fill the cart. Very labor intensive. The shafts had to be higher, obviously, because of the cart and because of the men working in there. So most of the shafts I've been in are probably around between 5 and 6 feet. When you go in the new cars, you go in the electric cars, and you have to lay down because of the head coverage. I wouldn't want to do it. I'm glad somebody does, but you have in the coal country down in West Virginia, Kentucky, you have 3 and 4 generations. That's all they've ever done, is mine coal. And the families have died in there in the explosion and falls. But it's just, they consider it a way of life, and that's the risk they take. As a farmer and a Farm Bureau member and a soil and water supervisor, we had an intense interest in doing something about the erosion that took place in the coal area, because what they did, what they call shoot and shove. They shot down about a 20 or 30 foot high wall, shoved it over the edge. That meant the topsoil was on the bottom, and then they went on around the hill, followed the contour around the hill, and no reclamation at all. They just eroded away and wound up in our streams. And there's a place called Shade Valley, Pleasant Valley down in, I think it's Meigs County. That was a highly productive area, about a mile wide, and with the river going through the middle of it. And 150 years ago, it had great production potential, but the silt coming off these mines eventually filled up the creek, and the creek spread out. Now we got one huge swamp down there. So our mission as farmers and conservationists was to do something. We weren't looking for a golf course. All we wanted to do was to level it off, plant something to keep the soil in place. And but we were up against an industry that was the most powerful industry in Ohio at that point, the coal industry. Any legislator that had the temerity to sign on to a reclamation law, he was out of business next year. They killed him. And we worked on that legislation starting back in the 40s, and it wasn't until we teamed up with the smelly, crazy environmentalists in the late 60s that we got the legislators' attention, and then the public perception of coal was taking a beating because of the press. And in '72, well, dealing with the environmentalists, their mission was to stop mining. They wanted to stop it. Well, our mission was to do something about it, make it socially acceptable. And we found ourselves in great debates in the back rooms with these people, because their mission was to stop it, our mission was to control it. And we finally got legislation enacted and introduced in 1970. It was passed in 1972. Now, showed how the politics works. If we'd had a Republican governor, he'd have vetoed it. We had a Democratic governor, he approved it, he signed it. And from '72 to '76, when I went there, the industry challenged us in court, all the way to Supreme Court. They considered it a takings law. Supreme Court said, no, it's an acceptable law, not takings. So we finally, that's the fortunate thing. We had 3 chiefs before me who just couldn't do a thing. Well, it was, the threats were there, and just a lot of contentious problems. And from 1972, we passed the law until '76, when I arrived there. The public perception had suddenly risen up to where the industry had to recognize they were in trouble. And the thing that saved my hide was the coal went from $2 a ton mine mouth, or at the strip mine, to $30 a ton, because remember the energy crunch? And that's what did it. So they couldn't claim they didn't have the money. So without that, I'd have been dead. Farming and environment, you're part of it. And if you don't address it, you're out of business. So it doesn't anything we dwelled on and learned in college or anywhere. It's just something that we knew we had to do in order to get the industry straightened out. And we had to, we had general support of the public generally supported. Number one, because of the good name of agriculture. They supported us in our venture on the coal industry because they knew we were trying to do a good job of farming. And so because of that, we got the attention of the legislature. And like I said, the price of coal went through the roof. And it's just, I can't explain why, in answer to your question, why, but it was just part of our business, and we saw it as important.